Gold, wealth, and power. How much is enough? What if I told you there exists a force, ancient and insidious, that has whispered in the ears of kings, corrupted the hearts of men, and turned empires into graves? A force not of flesh and blood, but of spirit, a fallen angel, a prince of darkness, Mammon. The world you see, the one you live in, has been shaped, twisted, and ruled by something far more powerful than you ever imagined. From the dawn of civilization, he has lurked in the shadows, seducing the powerful, enslaving the weak, and binding the ambitious to his will. This is not just a story. This is a revelation, the truth they never wanted you to know. In the beginning, before the first stone of the earth was laid, before the stars were cast into the heavens, there was light. And in that light, there was order. Among the divine host, standing in celestial splendor, was Mammon. Not as a demon, not as a god of greed, but as an angel, resplendent, honored, and entrusted with the riches of heaven itself. His robe shimmered with woven threads of starlight. His wings, vast and luminous, stretched across the golden expanse, reflecting the very glory of the Almighty. He walked among the halls of eternity, where the walls themselves pulsed with divine energy. There was no hunger, no lack, no greed, only perfection, and Mammon was content, at least at first. Heaven's treasury was unlike anything man could comprehend. Towers of purest gold stood like mountains of light. Vaults overflowed with gems that hummed with the songs of the cosmos. The very dust beneath Mammon's feet was not dust at all, but crushed diamonds, sparkling like frozen fire, and Mammon was guardian over it all. It was not ownership. No, nothing in heaven was owned, only given, only shared. But Mammon had the privilege of keeping watch over the wealth of the Almighty. And for an eternity, he did so faithfully, until something changed. At first, it was nothing more than a passing thought, a flicker in the vastness of his mind. Such beauty, such radiance, but why does it all belong to him? He dismissed it, shaking his head, but the thought had already taken root. As the eons passed, Mammon would pause a little longer in the halls of gold. His fingers would trail over the celestial treasures, his heart quickening at their brilliance. He would gaze into the endless light of heaven's wealth, and something stirred deep within him. A hunger, a longing, not for power, but for possession. Heaven was order. Heaven was unity. There was no mine or yours. But suddenly, Mammon saw things differently. I keep it, I guard it, and yet I do not hold it as my own. For the first time in all creation, desire was born in his heart. One day, as Mammon stood in the highest tower of the celestial treasury, bathed in golden light, he felt something, someone watching. A voice, smooth as silk, deep as the void beyond the stars, drifted from behind him. Tell me, brother, does it not seem unfair? Mammon's breath caught. He turned, and there stood Lucifer, a prince among angels, a being of unshaken beauty and might, the morning star himself. Lucifer stepped forward, his eyes gleaming, not with light, but with something else, something forbidden. Why should all this belong to one, when it could be shared by the worthy? Mammon did not answer. He did not need to, because deep within him, the hunger had already begun, and soon it would consume everything. Darkness did not exist in heaven. There was no shadow, no night, only light, unbroken and eternal. Yet, within Mammon, a shadow had taken root. It was small at first, nothing more than a whisper in the golden halls of his thoughts. But whispers, when left unchecked, can grow into storms. And storms, they change everything. Lucifer's presence was unlike any other. He walked among the divine host with a grace that was almost hypnotic, his radiance undeniable. The morning star, the first of the Most High's creation, the perfect one. And when he spoke, angels listened. You see it, don't you? Lucifer's voice was low, measured, yet laced with something forbidden. Mammon stood before the vast celestial vaults, their golden gates gleaming with heaven's endless treasures. He didn't turn to face Lucifer, but his fingers traced the intricate carvings on the vault doors. "See what?" Mammon's voice was calm, but inside, his pulse quickened. Lucifer stepped closer. The flaw, the injustice. The word was foreign, unfitting. Injustice? In heaven? Mammon frowned. "There is no injustice here." Lucifer chuckled, slow and deliberate. "And yet, you hesitate." Silence stretched between them. Mammon clenched his jaw, staring at the golden gates before him. Lucifer took another step. "You hold the key to heaven's riches. You guard them. You keep them. Yet you own nothing." He paused. "Tell me, Mammon, does that feel right?" Mammon's hands tightened. He felt it now, the storm brewing inside him. A thought, once dismissed, now refused to leave. He turned to face Lucifer. "What are you suggesting?" Lucifer's smile was like the edge of a blade. "A world where power is not given, but taken." Mammon was not alone in his thoughts. There were others, angels who had begun to feel the same pull, the same hunger. Power, recognition, possession. They met in whispers, in secret places where the blinding presence of the Almighty did not reach. Mammon listened. He watched. He saw the fire in their eyes. "Why should we serve when we could rule?" One voice murmured. "The throne belongs to him alone." Another hesitated. "And why should it?" Lucifer's voice cut through the doubt like lightning. "Why should one sit above all, while we, his greatest creations, bow?" The angels murmured in uneasy agreement. The seed was planted, and like a vine twisting through cracks in stone, it began to grow. It happened on the day heaven stood still. Lucifer, no longer in whispers but in thunder, declared the unthinkable. The throne should be ours. A gasp rippled through the divine host. A line had been drawn, and those who stood behind Lucifer stood behind Mammon as well. For the first time in eternity, heaven knew something it had never known before. Rebellion, and soon it would know war. Heaven trembled. For the first time since creation, the harmonies of eternity were broken, not by songs of praise, but by the clash of swords. The rebellion had begun. The sky, once a vast canvas of golden light, now split with storms of divine wrath. Lightning crackled as angelic forces clashed in the vast expanse of the heavens. The sound of metal rang through the celestial halls, swords of fire against blades of purest light. At the center of the chaos stood Lucifer, radiant and defiant, his voice booming like a tempest. "We were meant for more. We were meant to rule." Behind him, Mammon fought with ruthless precision, his golden wings stained with the embers of rebellion. No longer was he a mere keeper of heaven's wealth. He had become its plunderer. The rebels surged forward, striking against the loyal angels. The battle was unlike anything seen before. Seraphs fell, archangels roared, the very fabric of eternity shuddered. And then, a voice, a single, thunderous voice that shook the foundations of existence itself. Enough! The Almighty had spoken. A great silence fell. The rebels, who had moments before fought with fury, froze where they stood. The loyal angels withdrew, their swords still raised, waiting. Then, the light of heaven itself became a storm, a force beyond comprehension, beyond power, beyond anything Lucifer and his followers had ever known, surged through the very air. And in that moment, judgment was passed. A crack split the heavens open, an abyss of blackness, yawning like the mouth of the void. The rebels screamed, their forms twisting, burning, breaking apart as they were pulled downward by an unseen force. Mammon's wings burst into flames. The golden feathers that had once reflected heaven's glory turned to ash, scattering like dust in the wind. His form, once radiant, became twisted, grotesque, no longer an angel, but something else. He tried to fight against it. He clawed at the air, his eyes filled with terror and fury. "No, I will not fall." But the decree had been spoken, and Mammon, along with Lucifer and the others, plummeted. They fell for what felt like eternity, through storms of divine fire, through the endless void of nothingness. Their screams merged with the howling winds of exile. Then, impact, they crashed into a world unlike any they had ever known. A realm of darkness, burning but never consumed. A kingdom not of light, but of shadow. Lucifer rose first, his once glorious form now monstrous, terrible. He turned his gaze to the others, his eyes burning with a hatred that could never be extinguished. Mammon, trembling, lifted himself from the scorched ground. Around him, the wealth he had once longed for lay in ruin, corrupt, tainted, cursed. Lucifer's voice echoed through the abyss. "Welcome to our new kingdom." And so, the fallen became the damned, and Mammon, once the keeper of heaven's riches, became the god of greed. Darkness, endless, suffocating darkness. The fallen angels lay scattered, their bodies twisted, broken, their once radiant forms now unrecognizable horrors. The weight of their damnation pressed down on them, heavier than any chain. There was no light, no music, no peace, only suffering. But Lucifer, he did not mourn. He laughed. It started as a whisper, then grew into a deep, guttural chuckle. The others, still writhing from their fall, turned to look at him. Lucifer rose, his charred wings stretching out behind him. Though his beauty had been corrupted, his pride had not dimmed. He stood tall, his eyes glowing with an unholy fire. "He cast us out, but we are not destroyed." His voice echoed through the abyss. The fallen stirred. Mammon pushed himself up from the scorched ground, his fingers sinking into ashen earth. Around him, he saw the others, once princes of heaven, now exiles of eternity. Lucifer's voice boomed through the wasteland. "We will build anew. We will create a kingdom greater than heaven itself. A kingdom where we rule, where we hold dominion, where we are gods." The fallen roared in response. And so, the construction of Pandemonium began. Hell was no paradise. It was a realm born from wrath, shaped by vengeance. But where others saw ruin, Mammon saw opportunity. He walked among the wastelands, his keen eyes searching, his mind racing. "This place, it is empty," he murmured to himself. "It has no worth, no treasure, no power." Then the thought came, "Then I will create its wealth." Mammon set to work. From the blackened ground, he summoned great mountains of gold, cursed, tainted, yet gleaming with a sinister beauty. Jewels that shone with an unnatural fire, treasures that whispered to the souls of the damned, promising them power, feeding their hunger. And as he worked, the others took notice. Mammon's greed had not perished in the fall. It had grown. It was Lucifer who crowned him. Seated upon his infernal throne, Lucifer gazed down at Mammon, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he nodded. "You were heaven's treasurer. Now you shall be hell's." A new title was forged in the fires of exile, Prince of Greed. And Mammon? He embraced it. A city unlike any in existence rose from the ashes. Pandemonium. A golden fortress, built not with purity, but with corruption. A city of temptation, where the damned traded their very souls for fleeting wealth. Here, Mammon ruled, and the fires of his greed, they would burn forever. In the beginning, men did not seek wealth. They sought only to survive, to hunt, to gather, to build shelter against the coming storms. They looked to the sky, to the earth, to the sea, and they worshipped what they could not understand. And for a time, they were content. But Mammon? He waited. From the shadows of the unseen world, he watched them grow. He saw their hands, once calloused from labor, begin to shape tools. He saw their feet, once wandering, begin to settle and claim the land beneath them. And then he saw their eyes. They lingered on the rare, the beautiful, the untouchable. Gold. It started with a single thought. One man, digging in the earth, found something strange. A metal unlike any other. Soft, gleaming, warm under the sun. He held it in his hands, turning it over, marveling at how it caught the light. Mammon leaned in. "This is worth more than the rest." The man didn't know where the thought had come from, but he believed it. And so, he hid the gold. Mammon smiled, because now, for the first time, man knew greed. Gold became power. It was no longer enough to farm, to trade, to build. Men wanted more, and more always came at a cost. Mammon whispered into the ears of kings, of rulers, of warlords. "Your neighbor is gold. Should it not belong to you?" And so, swords were drawn, cities burned. Men who once shared bread at the same table spilled each other's blood over glittering stones. From Babylon to Egypt, from the thrones of Rome to the temples of the Aztecs, Mammon walked unseen, but his presence was felt everywhere. For every treasure hoarded, 1,000 lay in chains. Slaves were branded, lives were bought and sold. Gold became God. Priests once devoted to the heavens turned their altars into marketplaces. Rulers once entrusted with justice weighed their verdicts in coins. And Mammon? He grew stronger. Men built vaults, thinking they could contain their greed. They locked away their treasures, thinking they could own them. But Mammon laughed. "You do not own gold. It owns you." They called him by many names: fortune, prosperity, wealth. They built temples to him without realizing. They sacrificed without knowing. And even now, in the towers of Wall Street, in the vaults of Swiss banks, in the sweatshops of the broken and forgotten, Mammon still reigns. And the world? It is still hungry. Smoke, fire, the endless grinding of machines. The world was changing. The hum of the marketplace was no longer confined to village squares and bustling ports. It had grown louder, hungrier, unstoppable. Steel towers scraped the sky, factories devoured the land, and railways cut through the earth like veins of a new, mechanical beast. Mammon stood at the heart of it all, watching, smiling, feeding. The Industrial Revolution had begun, and greed had found a new home. They called it progress, this great transformation of man and machine. They said it was a new dawn, a brighter future, a world where wealth could be created at an unimaginable scale. But Mammon? He knew the truth. Progress was just another name for profit, and profit had a cost. The machines roared, but the people screamed. Children, too small to carry their own weight, were sent into coal mines where the air itself could kill. Men and women worked in factories where the sun never reached, their sweat and blood oiling the gears of industry. And the masters of this new world, they counted their gold. Mammon walked beside them, unseen but always present. "More," he whispered in their ears. "Build more. Expand. Take. Let nothing stop you." And they obeyed. The rivers turned black with poison. The air grew thick with soot. The land, once fertile and free, was chained beneath steel and smoke. But no one looked back. The earth will recover. A small price for greatness. What is nature to the future? The same whispers, the same lies. And Mammon? He simply watched. For the first time, the world was divided, not by borders, not by language, but by one thing alone: wealth. There were those who had everything, and those who had nothing, and the gap between them grew. The poor fought for scraps, while the rich built palaces high enough to forget the suffering below. The powerful hoarded riches they would never spend, while the weak were crushed under debts they would never repay. And as war erupted, as nations clashed for resources, as men sold their souls for wages barely enough to live, Mammon stood at the center of it all, grinning. The machines did not stop. The hunger did not fade. The world had become something new, something unstoppable. And Mammon? He did not have to whisper anymore, because now greed had become law, and mankind had become its willing slaves. The world has changed, or so they say. No more kings. No more warlords hoarding gold in towering castles. No more slaves shackled in chains, working under the crack of a whip. No, now the chains are invisible. Now they were suits, Now they sign contracts. Now they sell you the illusion of freedom, and you buy it without question. Mammon has never been stronger, and yet no one sees him. Skyscrapers stand where temples once did. Bank vaults replace the altars. The faithful no longer bow before idols of stone, but before glowing screens, stock tickers, and endless advertisements. Mammon walks through the trading floors of Wall Street, where fortunes are made and destroyed in the blink of an eye. He watches as men gamble with numbers on a screen, their hearts pounding with the same lust for wealth that once drove empires to war. Buy, sell, take, hoard. Never enough. Never enough. And they obey. They don't even know they're worshiping him. They call it lifestyle. They call it status. But Mammon calls it slavery. He whispers through billboards, through flashing neon lights, through influencers selling a dream that can never be reached. You need more? You are not enough. Look at them, look at what they have. Don't you want it too? And so, they chase. They drown in debt, desperate to keep up. They work until their bodies break, until their minds crumble under the weight of endless ambition. And for what? A brand name on a shoe, a logo on a car, a watch that costs more than a lifetime of labor. It is not enough to have money anymore. Now, they must prove it, show it, flaunt it. Mammon laughs, because he knows the truth. No matter how much they gain, they will always feel empty. Behind closed doors, men in tailored suits shake hands over deals that will destroy millions. They sign contracts that exploit the weak. They hide fortunes in offshore accounts while the poor starve. They bribe, they steal, they deceive. And if the world finds out, they deny. They call it a misunderstanding, a technicality, and then they move on, because power protects power. And Mammon? He is always there, watching from the shadows, smiling as the cycle continues. They think they are free. They think they own their wealth. But Mammon knows the truth. They do not own money. Money owns them. And in the end, when they have spent their lives chasing, clawing, bleeding for something they can never hold forever, they will realize they were serving him all along. Not all are blind. Not all bow. For every empire built on greed, for every kingdom that worships wealth, there are those who see through the illusion, those who recognize Mammon's deception and choose another path. There was once a man who had everything, wealth beyond measure, power that could shape nations, a life envied by millions. But one night, as he sat in his high-rise office, overlooking the city that he controlled, something shifted. The papers on his desk, worth millions. The investments on his screen, billions. And yet, he felt nothing. The hunger that had driven him his entire life had not disappeared. It had only grown deeper. Is this it? He whispered to himself. For the first time, he saw the truth. He was not free. He was not happy. He was owned. And so, he did the unthinkable. He walked away. He sold his empire, gave away his wealth, and vanished from the world that had once worshipped him. Some called him mad. Some called him a fool. But for the first time in his life, he was free. Mammon's grip is strong, but it is not unbreakable. There are those who resist. A woman who once lived for luxury now feeds the hungry with hands once adorned in gold. A man who once built corporate empires now builds homes for the homeless. Communities that once competed now share. Movements that once chased profit now chase purpose. And each time a man chooses kindness over greed, each time a woman gives instead of takes, each time someone says enough, I do not serve Mammon, his power weakens. Redemption is not found in gold, nor in power. It is found in the smallest choices. To be content when the world tells you to hunger. To give when greed tells you to hoard. To see people as souls, not numbers. Mammon does not fear the wealthy. He fears those who cannot be bought. And though his reign still grips the world, though his whispers still echo through cities and nations, there are those who have turned away, and their footsteps, they lead to something greater, something eternal. The battle never ended. It did not end when kings fell and empires crumbled. It did not end when men walked away from their wealth, when others chose generosity over greed. Because Mammon never truly disappears. He waits, he watches, and when the world grows weary, when men let their guard down, he whispers again. This is not a war fought with armies. No blood is spilled, no banners are raised. It is fought in the silence of the heart. Every day a choice is made. A man wakes up, struggling to make ends meet. The temptation comes. Take the bribe. Lie just once. No one will know. A woman, tired of feeling small, sees the world flashing its riches before her eyes. The whisper calls. You deserve more. Buy it. Chase it. Worship it. A leader stands before his people, a deal placed before him. The question lingers. Do what is right, or do what is profitable. Mammon does not force. He does not need to. He offers. And mankind, time and time again, accepts. There are those who see the truth. They know that wealth is not evil, but worshiping it is. They know that power is not wicked, but being ruled by it is. They fight, not with swords, but with contentment. Not with armies, but with wisdom. But the battle is never over, because every generation will face the same choice. Every heart will hear the same whisper. Every soul will stand at the same crossroad. Mammon's greatest lie? That you own your wealth. You don't, because when the final breath leaves your body, when the gold slips through your fingers, when the empire you built turns to dust, what will remain? Not your money, not your power, not your status, only the choices you made, only who you chose to serve. This story is not over. It is being written now, in every city, in every home, in every heart that hears the whisper and chooses. Mammon waits, but so does something greater. And the choice? It has always been yours. You have heard the story. You have seen his rise. You have seen his rule. And now you stand at the crossroad. Because Mammon is not just a demon of the past. He is here, now, in this world, in your world. And the only question that matters, who do you serve? Remember, there are only two masters, God and Mammon. Make the right choice. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe.